None of the students knew where this was going. It turned out that the O-ring in question was part of the design of the Space Shuttle Challenger. The night before the launch, engineers from the company that had built the O-ring recommended that the launch be delayed because they did not have conclusive proof that it would hold up in the cold weather predicted for the next day. Despite their concerns, however, management decided to proceed with the launch. As Ori's class listened, mesmerized, Fernandez launched into similar stories of irrational behavior. Movie executives bullied into hiring an actress who was obviously wrong for the part. A manufacturer that knowingly produced airplane brakes that caught fire, and more. Fernandez's point was that, although most of us think of ourselves as rational, we're much more prone to irrational behavior than we realize. It was a point that stayed with Ori long after business school, and it made us realize that our future professions had a lot more in common than we might originally have thought. Fernandez became a regular part of our vocabulary. Referring to someone who was obviously acting irrationally, we'd say, "This is a total Fernandez situation." And we found such situations everywhere we looked. In our own lives, in stories we read about the missteps of Fortune 500 companies, and in the actions of politicians. Meanwhile, while we never quite lived up to the Laurel Ingalls standard, as fate would have it, we did both become writers. The true genesis for this book came after a dinner conversation Ori had with a doctor who had been practicing obstetrics for the better part of 30 years. Dr. Jenkins possessed all the qualities you'd hope for in an OB-GYN. He was patient, he listened, he was smart, and most of all, he was experienced. You could count on him to make the right decision. The conversation drifted to group dynamics and how emotions play a major role in decision-making. Without thinking, Ori said, "I'm sure it's very different in your profession where you're all scientists." The doctor's face took on a serious expression as he explained that doctors are by no means immune to irrational forces, and because lives are on the line, the repercussions of irrational behavior can be devastating. Take what happened to ER Dr. Brian Hastings, who shared a story of how irrational behavior can derail even the most professional of physicians. A few weeks earlier, a woman had arrived at the emergency room in a panic. Her 2-year-old daughter, Amy, she said, was experiencing severe stomach pains. Abdominal pains might signal a condition as benign as indigestion, but the woman was worried it might be something more serious. Normally, doctors would start running tests and evaluating Amy's symptoms. Dr. Hastings paused in his story and quickly enumerated a litany of procedures the ER physicians could have performed. Rather than focusing on Amy, however, the doctors focused their attention on her mother. She was flustered and anxious and appeared overly concerned. Basically, she seemed to be the type of parent who'd overreact. The physicians made a judgment call to send Amy home. The very next day, Amy and her mom were back in the emergency room. Physicians know that when treating toddlers, it's absolutely vital to listen to their parents, who usually have an acute sense of when something is wrong with their child. But at the same time, the doctors now had even more evidence that Amy's mom was overreacting. Here she was again at the hospital, showing all the signs that she was the kind of hypochondriac they refer to as a frequent flyer. Once more, the doctors sent Amy home without running any tests. The third day started out pretty much the same way as the previous two. Amy and her mother returned. The doctors became even more convinced that the mother was overreacting. It was only when Amy lost consciousness that the doctors realized something was terribly wrong. But by then, it was too late. Dr. Hastings shook his head.